How to overcome regret. All of us have our regrets. We have regrets on the short term. You may have said something, reacted to something quickly, and then realized you shouldn't have. We have long-term regrets, things that happened in the past in our lives that we feel we could have done differently, sometimes really serious ones that haunt us. So regret is a very much part of the human condition. So that's what I want to talk about that. I'll just cut straight to the chase. There's a formula and a rule I want you to remember, because it doesn't just impact regret, it impacts every area of our lives. And that is any feeling, whether it's regret, shame, any negative feeling about anything, you have to ask yourself, what is it doing to you? If you want to determine if it's a healthy feeling or not, what is it doing to you? If it's demoralizing you and makes you feel unmotivated, makes you feel depressed, makes you feel like you want to isolate yourself. In other words, it doesn't do anything to get you going, you can rest assured it's unhealthy. If, on the other hand, it's a regret or a shame or another feeling of that you wish things could have been done, but it motivates you. That's the word, motivate versus demoralize. If it motivates, you know that it has something positive in it. I know it sounds simple, but just identifying that is the good beginning to determine what is negative in our lives and what is positive. Because look, we all make our mistakes. We make a mistake in our personal lives. We can make a mistake in our professional lives. Depends what happens next. I have people working for me. Everybody makes mistakes. I always say, learn from your mistake. If you learn from your mistake and don't repeat it again, or you become even stronger or greater in the process, you know something redeemable has come out of it, and that is beautiful. There is no such thing as a perfect human being. There's no such thing as something being done impeccable without any flaws. But let's dig a little deeper. Let's drill down on this topic. I'll just use a case study of an example that I've dealt with more than once, but one that comes to mind. Person who their earlier part of their lives, they dated someone, and they for a long time, and then she finally said, no, he's not for me. And it was, in retrospect, not necessarily in her mind a correct decision. And he went on, got married, built a family, but till this day she's still haunted by it, because she realized she was distracted, she was focusing on the wrong things, and in general had her own fears, and basically rejected him not for the right reasons. So there's terrible guilt involved. Terrible guilt because how her life would have turned out. Now, you can't turn the clock back, and he's already gone on with his life, but this haunts her. So when she dates other people, she can't get over it. One scenario. Another case study. Someone who did something really terrible to another person. It was in school, in their college years, and they did something that was inappropriate to the other person, that embarrassed them, humiliated them, and affected them, I don't know about long term, but definitely in a deep way. And at the time, nothing was done to correct it. Now he wants to correct it. Now, of course, he can call her up and say, hey, listen, I apologize, but she won't take his calls, because it was a very serious issue. That is something he really did bad. Now, these are not uncommon events. We all have, sometimes perhaps not so dramatic, sometimes even more dramatic, things we really did. And sometimes it was an accident, sometimes it was quite deliberate. So these are real forces in life. I'm not talking about small petty things that you can easily overlook or easily correct. I'm talking about deeper stuff. Let's talk about parents and children. A parent or parents who have hurt their children, abused their children, or other ways hurt them. Now, of course, you have people who deny it and they minimize it and they don't want to acknowledge it, but there are those that do acknowledge it, and damage has been done. And again, you can't reverse the process. You can't turn the clock back. So what do you do in all these circumstances? So let's go back to the point I made at the outset. The first and most important thing to know is not whether you did a wrong thing. We all agree something wrong was done. If nothing wrong was done and it was a misunderstanding, we'll address that briefly in a few minutes. But let me first address something. Actually, something was done, and everyone agrees that was not a good thing, that should have not happened. And another thing, that it caused long-term problems. I don't want to say long-term damage, because I'm going to address this now in a moment from the perspective of the one that was hurt, the victim, so to speak, the survivor, not the perpetrator. But we're talking about the perpetrator now, who's the one that has the guilt. And, that's already a beginning of good news, because there's some people don't even have guilt. Either they deny something happened, or they just are able to have no conscience, and they're basically unscrupulous. You have people like that, even if they're not officially sociopaths. But in the case we're talking about, someone does have that regret. So that if something negative happened, we know. The question is, what happens next? Now, if you're a sensitive and a true and a sincere, genuine person, and authentically regret what happened, so there's a few things that you should be doing. Number one is, you should be asking for forgiveness. Not lip service. Actually, remorse. Go to the person that you've hurt, even if it's a long time ago, even if it was long-term damage or effect, and you go to the person. There is a process here. Forgiveness is a real, true, healthy, psychological, and emotional way of healing. In Hebrew, the word forgiveness means circle. Circle means you want to complete a broken circle. Now, the person who you've hurt may not forgive you, and that may be their right, even though they also should have the obligation to free themselves, but that's not what we're discussing now. We're not talking about forgiveness, but you have to make your attempt. After several attempts, and you can't get anywhere, you can at least say, I've done my best. The second thing is, we talked about something positive. So what's another positive thing that can come out of it? Is, what have you learned from this? You've learned what you've done wrong. Did you learn to become a better person, especially in those areas? Double and triple your efforts in channeling and in many ways redeeming. When I say redeeming, it doesn't mean that the hurt wasn't done, but in some ways you redeem the positive growth that comes out of it. So let's say you hurt somebody. In this case, we talked about someone being hurt in college. So whatever it was that you did to hurt that person, go ahead and double and triple your efforts to help people exactly in that same way. You badmouthed them, their reputation was tarnished because you said things you shouldn't have said. You posted things you shouldn't have posted. So now your particular Achilles heel, if you wish, is your sensitive area, is that you have to now double and triple your efforts to make sure to help people. Not only to protect those that have been hurt by people, again, by slander and bad mouthing individuals, but going ahead and finding a way to actually speak well about people. That becomes part of your mission. That means you're taking it, not just demoralization and the weakness and the negativity that comes out of regret, but you've turned it into something positive. In the case of the first case study that I mentioned, and then we'll go to the parents, where look, it's too late now. You made that choice. Maybe it was not meant to be. Maybe it would not have been a happy marriage. Maybe that regret maybe you shouldn't have regretted at the time, but after the fact, it may have been a blessing in disguise. You're able to think that way. The fact that you're haunted by the negativity about a thing you can't do anything about makes me think, and should make you think, that maybe you're not freeing yourself from a past. Maybe you need to look forward and say, okay, I have to free myself. That's what happened. And you can't second guess and keep saying, what if, and you can't rewrite the narrative. This is now the new narrative of your life. That's how you turn that into a positive. And what do you learn from it? That this time, focus on what matters. And yes, go find the Mr. Right in your life. Now, I understand emotionally it's hard to let go, but that's the work you need to do. So as long as it's keeping you trapped and paralyzed, you can rest assured the regret that you had then pales in comparison to what's happening now in your life, because it's paralyzing you to go forward. Now, I understand that's in the mind. It's easier said than done, but that's the work you need to do. We need to free our souls from negativity that brings us down and does not motivate us to grow. And finally, with the parents. Now, the parents, no question, there's a forgiveness element there that's necessary if the parents can bring themselves to do so. And at the end of the day, parents and children are always connected. But if the damage was severe, and the child, who's now an adult, has been seriously hurt, you may not have control over it as a parent. Your regrets do not compel the person you hurt to forgive you. Even if they forgive you, at least lip service, but you hurt them. You have your accountability to play. So what you can do is, you have to work overtime and hard to demonstrate that not only do you regret what happened, but you're doing things to try to correct and mend. What will happen with that person, the child that you hurt, that's not up to you. And that's a critical element as well. We do not control what other people do. We control what we do. Just as we hurt somebody, you control how you're going to deal with it. Many of us think that I must get the other person to forgive me because that's the only way to heal. No, you have to heal. It's not your responsibility, nor is it your right to tell someone else what they have to do in order for you to feel better. So regret there again can be a negative, demoralizing, a toxic form of negativity that does not bring anything positive, or you can turn it into something positive, become a better person. Because unfortunately, in a case like that with parents and children, and I've had to deal with this as well, very often the child, the boy or girl, the son or daughter will say, my parent doesn't really regret. They regret that I was hurt. They regret that I feel I was hurt. They regret that they were caught. They regret that it became public. Or that it doesn't look good for the family and for the pictures. My parents didn't really change. Now that may or may not be true. We can't know, and I'm not passing any judgment, but it's possible. And very often we just want to be off the hook. We want to be able to feel at peace, feel my conscience is clean, because the person I hurt has said, you didn't really hurt me, or I forgive you, or I let go. Even if they let go, and that's their right, and they have find ways to free themselves from the hurt that they received, that doesn't mean that you are off the hook. You still need to deal with what you need to deal with. So this really means you need to look deeper into your soul. Most of us would prefer to not necessarily have to change anything. We prefer it just goes away. But that's not true, healthy regret. That's the negative and the toxic form of it. So those are a few examples. But I want to add insert another key point. It's a very powerful statement made by a great mystic and Hasidic Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi in Tanya. In the 4th section, he says the following. He speaks about anger, that people get angry at another for hurting them. And he makes this statement. He says, anger comes because you are convinced that the other person is the cause of your pain. It's true that they implemented it. But if you suffered pain, it means you needed to suffer pain. And if it wasn't them, someone else would have done it. Now, this does not mean that they're off the hook. They are guilty and are fully accountable for what they did. But you have to say to yourself, why did this happen to me? What do I learn from it? We have the story in the Bible from Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. First, they almost killed him out of jealousy. 22 years he was away. And now he became a great leader in the process. When they finally meet, the reunion of the brothers and Joseph, so you can imagine, Joseph had all the right, being not just enraged, and he had the power to do anything he wished with them. And instead he tells them, despite their deep humiliation and embarrassment, he tells them, and they of course had regrets, he tells them, you didn't do this to me. God led me to this place to become the viceroy of Egypt, to be able to sustain and save you, our family, and multitudes of people from the great famine that was raging at the time. Now, how he had that presence was because he did not allow himself to be called a victim. Now, you could say he could have regretted, he shouldn't have gone out into the field to meet his brothers, he shouldn't have shared his dreams, he shouldn't have provoked them. But he looked at it this way. We have to look forward. There are things that happened that are very painful. And people will be held accountable. The brothers are held accountable ultimately. But he was not going to be defined by them. So let's now talk about regret. The person receiving the pain is really not the focus here, but obviously in this discussion it will come up. But let's talk about the person who perpetrated. So yes, the person who perpetrated needs to be accountable, needs to turn it into something positive, but you also have to know, what did you learn from it? It happened. Now, what did you learn from it and how do you grow through it? So it's an interesting double process here. On one hand, yes, you have total accountability, but there's also deeper lessons to be learned. So when you look at the whole picture, you'll see the key thing is to remember we cannot allow our subjective emotions and our feelings to control the circumstances. To live in the haunting shadow of regrets that does not do anything positive just perpetuates any of the pain and any of the problems involved. Talking now for the person who is doing the regretting. So the key thing is to redeem it. The key thing is to find any way possible to correct, to find forgiveness in the person's heart that you hurt. If it's a regret not with a person, but it's a regret of your own behavior, is to forgive yourself. Is to forgive yourself, to allow yourself to be freed from it. And the greatest outlet is when you turn it into something positive. Things that you may have done differently. So you know what? You can't change what happened back then, but you can do things differently now. Unfortunately, many of us don't do that. We continue that vicious cycle, which now includes also the guilt that we live with. Everything that was happened in our past, even things that truly are regrettable, can be transformed into something positive. Someone told me that they were involved in a crime many years ago, and someone was murdered. They didn't do it directly, but they were involved in the whole plotting of it. And how do you ever forgive yourself for that? Someone's life came to an end. So I told the person, look, I can't tell you how you can ever get forgiveness from the family of your part in it, but I can tell you this, the rest of your life, you must commit to bring life to people and go out of your way to save people's lives, to help bring life to people. To his credit, it took time. He began getting involved and is now part of an organization that does exactly that. Now, does that mean that the parents and the family of the person who was killed, everything is fine? No, it doesn't mean that at all. That happened. But the best one can do is at least he's turned his life into something meaningful, which is directly informed by the things that were very so regrettable. So though we cannot change the past, we can channel it into many different directions. The worst thing you want is, like I said, paralysis, demoralization, a breakdown, where the past does not allow us to build a better future. Now, because our souls are resilient, even though our bodies and our actions can cause something that's irreversible, but the soul's resilience and the soul's ethereal and spiritual nature allows it to travel on and find new opportunities. And that's exactly what we need to be doing. So I'm not suggesting that in a 20-minute, a 25-minute discussion like this, we suddenly can resolve that billion-dollar question, how do you get rid of regrets? And I'm not looking to get rid of them. We're looking to direct them, to turn them into some positive catalyst for growth. So they can't really do that in a short period of time. But I hope I planted some seeds that if you explore them further, and most importantly, you integrate them emotionally, because it's going to come down to emotions, not just making sense in your mind, not just an ideological concept. Emotionally being able to recognize that. And this has required a commitment to life, a commitment to positive life. To not just not making that same mistake again, but to be extra sensitive and acutely aware of things we say, of things we do, of things we think. That's what it comes down to. When we were younger, many of us have been more casual, more superficial. But now we have the opportunity to, especially once you've been burned, or you have been burned, or were burned by somebody, and you've had an experience, is to become far more sensitive souls. And not just get caught up in the merry-go-round, okay, let's just move forward and ignore everything that happened. Become a more sensitive, a more loving person. Some of the most loving people on this earth, the most refined people, are people who went through the fire. Some at the side of receiving the rough end of the stick, meaning people who were hurt by others, and some who actually hurt others. And everybody can find some redemption. At the same time, you do not control what happens in other people's lives. You had your chance, and you may have not used it properly. So now they need to continue with their journey. If you can be of help, if you can gain the forgiveness, and you can close the circle, and you can build, then obviously that's the ultimate goal. And we have these rare stories where sometimes people who really hurt each other at some point are able to find the presence of mind, the love within, to come together and build something greater. And in the process, everyone becomes greater people. So, my friends, I hope this was a meaningful and meaningful live moment that really can help us in these type of challenging situations. We're here this is a live broadcast every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, but it's archived, fully accessible all the time. I'd love to hear your comments, your shares, your likes, your feedback, your anything, suggestions for further topics to discuss. This has been Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is the website with a full, robust schedule of programming and offerings. Please take advantage. Stay in touch. May we only have positive experiences and turn those regretful moments into powerful forces of change. Thank you, and everyone be well.